Good evening, Bren, and welcome to the Lodge Hope of Karachi number 337 and our lockdown lecture series on this very special day. And can I say to you all, may the 4th be with you. That's the first of the jokes for this evening, Bren. And I hope that you've seen on the Facebook and the lead-in that we've been doing typical Hollywood fashion, some teasers for our speaker this evening. However, before we get to the main business of the evening, can I remind you all of the Grand Lodge of Scotland guidelines on Zoom meetings? Please keep your video on. If you do have challenges with your bandwidth, Brian, just drop me a little message in the chat. That would be very much appreciated. And a recognisable name. First prize does go to our past provincial Grand Master for Stirlingshire for coming, maybe not in costume, but changing his name. Thankfully, I did recognise who he was, so we let him in. Apologies, Brian. Only joking, Alistair. Brian, can I ask you also to sign the virtual tile on our Facebook pages? As ever, it keeps our secretary very busy during lockdown. Thank you very much. Well, Brian, as we all know, this is Star Wars Day, and I approached this evening's speaker quite a few months ago thinking, what's the chance of getting us a presentation about Star Wars and Freemasonry? And on a variety of the American Masonic pages, I came across our speaker for this evening, Brother Michael Jarzabek, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, Michael. But it gives me the greatest of pleasure to introduce you to Oliver Byrne, and Byrne, I introduce to you Brother Michael Jarzabek for the first lockdown lecture that is truly out of this world. Brother Michael.
Thank you. Good evening, brethren. Thank you for having me here. Really appreciate it. Usually I have to preface this talk by saying that this is all in fun, but you guys seem like you're having a blast already, so I guess I don't really need to do that. So this presentation, at the end of it, the presentation only runs about a half an hour. And after that, I really want to get your feedback and see what you think. And feel free to challenge me and come up with your own ideas. And I think we'll have a lot of fun. Let me share my screen.
That's perfect, Michael. We can see that.
Thank you. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a boy stands on Tatooine, staring up at two suns as they travel across the desert sky. He stands on shifting sands, devoid of water, where living things struggle to grow. He dreams of one day flying across the sky in a starship. He dreams of joining the rebellion. He dreams of becoming a hero in a cosmic play. Our unlikely hero is not much different than a young entered apprentice, standing at the door to the lodge. In this talk, I'll discuss the parallels between the allegories of Freemasonry and the mythos of the movie Star Wars, as well as ways that we can apply these timeless lessons to our everyday lives. We need to be careful not to think of rebellion in a literal manner. When we speak of it, we talk not of wars pertaining to obtaining the levers of power and state. Let us think more of the rebellion of youth, more Didi Ramon than Maximilien Robespierre. We speak of reimagining a culture devoid of the mistakes of our parents. The impetuousness of youth wrests control from the caution of old age. Again, I caution us not to think too literally. I can't stress this enough. Plato spoke about those that only wanted peace and those that only wanted war. Both ways in his mind led to slavery. The harmony of these impulses led to healthy progress. Like the motor and braking system in a car, neither the brake nor the gas is bad if we apply them at the right moment. Only the context is important. The rebellion of Freemasonry breaks the chains of mental slavery. There is no evil empire against which the craft raises its arms in resistance. The only revolutions are the circambulations that we perform around the lodge and the pilgrimages that we perform throughout our lives. Let's compare Freemasonry and Star Wars using this shared understanding. The Star Wars saga is a public ritual for the modern masses. George Lucas is on record as saying that he created these movies to serve as a mythology for our time by creating a futuristic story based on past cultures. He borrowed themes, settings, and character archetypes from a multitude of philosophies, genres, and cultures in order to create depth. Freemasonry is similar. Like the composite pillar, it has only what is borrowed and differs only accidentally. It would be a mistake to claim one source as the primary inspiration for either of these rituals, since both draw their inspiration from multiple, diverse sources. Some sources, however, are more critical to the structure than others. Ancient Greek culture is one of those sources. To the Greeks, therefore, and not to the Romans. Ancient Greek culture is deeply enmeshed in the modern Western experience. Were it removed by simply pulling its threads, the entire tapestry of our civilization would likely come apart. The same is true for Freemasonry and Star Wars. Ancient Greek tragedy is a part of that culture. One of the primary goals of the Greek tragedy is catharsis. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines catharsis as a purification or purgation of the emotions, such as pity and fear, primarily through art. While catharsis is often an intellectual exercise, it is not primarily so. It engages the emotion as well as the intellect. The ancient mystery schools used Greek tragedy, and by extension catharsis, as tools. In Greek tragedy, the audience, or initiates, experience catharsis by their connection to a character in the drama. The characters used to elicit this response were known as tragic heroes. The state-sanctioned mystery schools were systematically destroyed through a succession of programs of religious intolerance, cultural appropriation, and assimilation, specifically targeting polytheistic beliefs and practices. Echoes of these traditions survive, however incomplete, in both Western esoteric rituals, such as Freemasonry, and modern cinema. Two characters representative of this connection are Hiram Abiff and Anakin Skywalker. Both characters are examples of the virtues and vices of humanity. In Freemasonry, we tend to concentrate on the virtues in preference to vice. We learn what to do rather than what not to do. We learn in Freemasonry that a man's character hinges on the four cardinal virtues of temperance, prudence, fortitude, and justice. These virtues were often represented allegorically, either through art or literature. I should note that these virtues were initially discussed in Plato's works and were adapted over the years in several different contexts, including that of Freemasonry. While this might appear to be the same, it is merely similar. The explanation in our ritual is not the same as the one in the works of Plato. For the purpose of this discussion, we will stick to the Masonic definitions. The serious Masonic student would vastly improve their understanding by studying the works of Plato. Outside of Freemasonry, we often find these virtues allegorically represented in the following ways. Justice is often represented by a sword, balance, and scales, or a crown. Temperance, we find adorned with a wheel, bridle, reins, vegetables, fish, cup, water, or wine in 2 jugs. Fortitude is seen wearing armor with a club, a lion, palm, tower, yoke, or a broken column. Lastly, prudence is represented with a book, a scroll, or a mirror, and is sometimes attacked by a serpent. The first thing you might notice is that the symbols often used to represent these virtues we find within other contexts of our rituals. The sword, cup, lion, broken column, and book are all used in different contexts within our ritual. Might this be intentional? By this realization, we can see that the 4 cardinal virtues are present in each of the degrees, even though they are most associated with the entered apprentice. Throughout our progression, we begin to refine our understanding of the overt references to these ancient virtues. In the emblems, we find the sword pointing to a naked heart and learn that it should remind us of justice that justice will soon overtake us. We also learn that outside forces don't distribute this justice. Instead, it's delivered through the all-seeing eye residing in our heart. We see in the marble monument with the Virgin weeping both a book and a broken column. The context of these symbols was explained to us. However, they likely have a dual meaning, which is hinted at due to the book being recognized as a record of virtue. We know from our earlier examination of the allegories associated with the virtues that the book represents prudence and the column fortitude. We later find these two virtues on display during the legend of the third degree. Likewise, we find the Book of Constitutions guarded by the Tyler sword, representing prudence and justice, respectively. The lion and the reference to the lion, I will leave you to your own contemplations. What if, to expand this refinement, we were to look at Star Wars characters as allegorical representations of those virtues? How would they be represented? Let's take a few minutes to think about it. For this part, I wrote a short contemplation, so please feel free to follow along in silent contemplation as I take you on a short journey. Sit in silence, like the legendary bounty hunter Boba Fett. Still your body, like Han Solo, suspended in carbonite. Quiet your mind, like Luke in his X-Wing fighter, as he prepares to destroy the Death Star. You are a young Padawan or apprentice Jedi at the Academy. Tonight was your initiation into that ancient order. As you lay in bed, you struggle to temper the emotions which swirl around you after that powerful experience. Your mind returns to the lessons taught to you by your initiator. They told you so many things, but one stands out amongst them all in importance. You were taught that all Jedi, in fact, all heroes, strive to attain virtue. As a Padawan, you were taught 4 of them: temperance, prudence, fortitude, and justice. You think back to your history classes at the Academy. You begin to wonder which heroes of the Resistance most represented those virtues. You think of the legendary Luke Skywalker, his trusty R2 unit by his side. What virtues did he embody? You think of General Leia Organa Solo, standing next to a golden protocol droid named C-3PO. She's a symbol of the Resistance, but which symbol specifically? You even think of Han Solo, the smuggler turned reluctant hero, with his faithful companion Chewbacca towering over him. Could this complicated man be identified with a virtue? Or was he just in the right place at the right time? And did he choose the side with the greatest chance of winning? Suddenly, darkness and fear overtake you. You hear the heavy, rhythmic breathing of Lord Vader. Why are you thinking of him? He couldn't possibly possess virtue. Or could he? Wasn't he evil incarnate? As a chill comes over your body, you push down the fear deep inside of you. With calm trepidation, you slowly open your eyes and scan the room to make sure that Darth Vader was only in your mind and that he isn't standing over your bed watching you sleep. Please feel free to slowly open your eyes if they were previously closed in contemplation. The interesting part of this is that it makes me think that neither the virtues nor the characters are monolithic. So they all contain the other's aspects in some way. The dark side is only defeated when all 4 virtues are harmonized individually and as a group, and justice is brought into harmony with the other 3 virtues. Many believe that Luke will fulfill a prophecy by bringing balance to the Force. Out of the 4 virtues, Luke most represents temperance. We remember that temperance is that due restraint upon our affections and our passions, which renders the body tame and governable, and frees the mind from the allurements of vice, and that this virtue should be the constant practice of every Mason, as he is thereby taught to avoid excess, or the contracting of any licentious or vicious habit, the indulgence of which might lead him to disclose some of those valuable secrets which he has promised to conceal and never reveal, and which would consequently subject him to the contempt and detestation of all good Masons. One of the first paradoxes of Freemasonry is that after we affirm our free will, the first thing we learn is how to restrain ourselves. We learn to suppress our primal nature in preference for a more refined, civilized existence. As Masons, we're dedicated to order and beauty in all things, harmony being the strength and support of all institutions. We learn to temper our emotions. This doesn't mean that we should completely suppress them. Instead, it means that we should harmonize them. With what should we harmonize our emotions? With our divine nature and higher purpose, with the natural laws, with reason. As a Jedi, Luke has to learn to temper his emotions. When we first meet him, those emotions are the active and energetic passions of youth. He's prone to anger and impulsiveness. As he ages, he allows guilt and remorse to reduce him to a solitary lifestyle, devoid of all hope. He no longer takes an active part in his community, and he refuses to engage with others to build the future. It seems that temperance goes hand in hand with prudence. You might even say they're twin virtues. It's through prudence, therefore, that we determined which emotions to temper and to what degree. Luke's twin, Leia, in my mind, represents prudence. Prudence teaches us to regulate our lives and actions agreeably to the dictate of reason, and is that habit by which we wisely judge and prudentially determine on all things relative to our present as well as our future happiness. This virtue should be the peculiar characteristic of every Mason, not only for the government of his conduct while in lodge, but also when abroad in the world. It should be particularly attended to in all strange and mixed companies, never to let fall the least sign, token, or word, whereby the secrets of Masonry might be unlawfully obtained. Prudence in the ritual here is described as a habit. In learning to temper our passions, we were cautioned not to let any uncivilized or wild habits rule and govern our lives. But how do we determine which habits to engage in? Our habit, or our prevailing disposition, should be to examine our actions, to judge their worth by the dictate of reason. Even though she's a princess, Leia is not defined by the stereotypes of that role. When it's time to take out stormtroopers, she has no problem picking up a blaster and defending herself. Leia is a woman of three dispositions. She is a princess, she's a Jedi, and she's a general. She unites within her the ruler, the warrior, and the priest. No matter which role she plays, she continually exercises good judgment over and over again. Prudence is married to fortitude. Likewise, as Han Solo, our exemplar for fortitude, married to our embodiment of prudence, Leia. We learn from our ritual that fortitude is that noble and steady purpose of mind, whereby we're unable to undergo any pain, peril, or danger when prudentially deemed expedient. The first equally distant from rashness and cowardice, and, like the former, should be deeply impressed upon the mind of every Mason as a safeguard against any illegal attack that may be made by force or otherwise to extort from us any of those valuable secrets with which he has been so solemnly entrusted and which were emblematically represented upon his first admission into the lodge. Han has to overcome his lack of desire to get involved, to grow as an individual, and to take his place at the side of nobility. When we meet him, he's selfish and ironically unattached. Han eventually shows the fortitude to still love Ben, even after all that he's done. He still sees the good in him. He even goes as far to go on a suicide mission, where he sacrifices himself in a last-ditch effort so that Ben can see the error in his ways. This selfless act of fortitude plants the seed of redemption in Kylo Ren. When it mattered most, Han gave up his life in order to save others. Justice is the father of temperance and prudence. Justice is that standard or boundary of right, which enables us to render to every man his just due, without distinction. This virtue is not only consistent with divine and human laws, but it's the very cement and support of civil society. And as justice in a great measure constitutes the real good man, so should it be the invariable practice of every Mason never to deviate from the minutest principles thereof. I had trouble choosing a character to represent justice. In many ways, justice in the strictest sense of the word would probably be the force itself. But if I were to select that, I'd be taking the easy way out of my initial thesis question. If I had to choose a character that most exemplifies justice, there's only one clear choice: Anakin Skywalker. Anakin chooses love over all else, and in doing so, indirectly fulfills the prophecy. He does this at two critical junctures. Initially, he does it by acting on his love for Padme. Secondly, he does it by the love of his son. Redemption is a form of justice, especially when it comes from such a noble sacrifice. Above and beyond this, Anakin bears the scars of his choices with no visible regret. He was manipulated and mishandled by others throughout his life, but he fulfills his duties by evidence that he finally does become a Jedi, even if it's as a Force ghost. We can see more clearly, by using Star Wars characters, the effects of a life lived in harmony with the virtues. We can also see the consequences of succumbing to vice. The characters of the Star Wars universe are often tragic heroes. Like in life, there is no happily ever after. We see the yearning of youth and in the acceptance of old age. We see the seeds of love blossom in the pain of loss. We see the birth and death of both hope and desire. What do we learn as Freemasons from this work of pop culture? We learn to temper our passions, guided by prudence, and ennobled by fortitude, knowing that in the end, justice will always prevail. Earlier, we spoke of rebellion. The practicing Mason, that industrious soul, willing to work in the quarry, whether he be in Boston or Berlin, is the front line of the rebellion. He picks up his working tools and sets himself to labor alongside his brothers. He learns, he subdues his passions, and he improves himself in Masonry. He exercises his free will and becomes the master of his own soul. The lessons we learn by rote memorization aren't hollow. We must apply them. We must exemplify them until we become them. Benjamin Franklin kept a ledger of his progress in attaining several virtues. How much progress have we each made in the attainment of virtue since becoming Freemasons? How will the master of the celestial lodge above allow us to wear our aprons? I hope that my hard work inspires him to accept me as an added apprentice, as a brother. To this end, I work every day. I work to be a better man. I work to earn my apron, to earn the right to be called a Mason, to earn the right to be called your brother. I aspire to one thing in Masonry and one thing only. I aspire to live respected and die regretted. If I do that, we will win the rebellion of one man's soul, and our hope will end in fruition. My brothers, be the rebellion. That is what we came here to do. May the force be with you. At this point, I'd like to open up the floor to allow anyone to challenge the characters that I chose and share your reflections. And it's my hope that in exchanging ideas, rather than me just lecturing, that we'll join together, achieve a richer understanding of our most cherished virtues and our wonderful craft.
Brother Michael, thank you so much on behalf of all the guests here in a galaxy far, far away, as we all strive as your young Padawans to become Jedi Masters. And I'm sure that we will have some interesting questions coming from the floor to further that debate, whether we are not characters in our own lives or we are just characters in the minds of George Lucas. So, Bren, if anybody's got any comments, we'll do it slightly differently this week. If you can just put your hands up, and then we can pose the question to Michael, because we're not in our normal planet. We're in Tatooine. So, does anybody have any questions, or have you all gone shy? Danny Solo. Danny.
Hi. What do you think the Empire would then represent as a whole?
I mean, I think it's a good question. I mean, you have in the Rebellion and the Empire those two different, like if you would go back to Plato's The Republic, I mean, you have kind of two ways of organizing society, right? Like the Empire is very strict. There's not a lot of freedom, and then you have in the Rebellion more of the democratic freedom, or the democratic republic that you would see. So, you know, I guess the Empire would be the opposite of having free will. It would be a man enslaved to his desires. It would be a man, you know, probably by evidenced by the Sith. It'd be kind of a, you know, an uninspiring, dark, drab, you know, it's not a very beautiful place, right? The Empire, it's cold and stark. So that's kind of what I would think.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. And he's not talking about Thurso being a cold and dark and uninspiring place, because it's a beautiful part of the country, as we all know. Gerard, your hands up. And you're going to get that famous line. Yep.
Unmute. Yes, I've unmuted. Yes. It's very interesting, the lecture that was given. But is there anything redeeming about the virtues of the Empire? Because I'll be honest with you, I've always preferred the bad guys. They've always had the best lines. They've always had the best music. And as you say, the devil tends to have the best music in life. So it's not always the Republic that's always the great thing about it. So I would ask, is there anything that is good about the Empire, or is it all terrible?
I mean, that's another good question. I mean, you know, in the first way that you stated it, you asked if there was anything redeeming about the Empire, and I would say that Darth Vader was the redemption of the Empire. But that's not really what you asked in the long run, so I'll address that. You know, I think Disney's trying to do their best at trying to show that it's not a one-sided story. I think you're seeing that in some of the things that they're putting out now, that there are redemption in the Empire. I think there are people caught up on both sides that maybe aren't doing it to choose that, that they didn't choose that way of life, right? It's kind of where they grew up and the situation they were in, similar to life. You know, you sometimes find yourself on the wrong side of history by no fault of your own. And so I guess the redemption is in the humanity, I would say, of the characters. I mean, Finn was a stormtrooper, you know, and he found a way to be good. So I think he kind of speaks to that. But I appreciate that question, as it really made me think.
Thank you.
Stephen O'Donnell.
Yes, hello, Brother Mike. It's good to see you again.
Great to see you, Steve.
Yes, I've got a question. Having the understanding that Joseph Campbell guided George Lucas in creating the spiritual aspects of the story, and the Skywalker family being the solar hero. Last night I was watching the last in the sequel, the one that came out in 2019. And at the end of it, it shows Rhea going down into the Sith Lord's domain and battling out with the Sith, and she goes up and confronts her grandfather, is it? Yes, it's her grandfather, her great grandfather. And he wants her to kill him in order that she would inherit all the powers of the underworld. And whilst watching that, Rhea kind of put me in mind of the solar hero going through the journey of the underworld, which makes it confusing with the two of them battling the Sith Lord, her grandfather, and him dying and her walking away. What do you think that represents? Is that the two becoming the one, or is it the birthing of the new solar hero to continue the journey?
My first reaction is that it shows that, you know, Star Wars is always, it's the one, right? Everybody's expecting Luke or Anakin, then Luke, then Rey to become the one, that they're destined to be that. It's their fate and it's inescapable. And I think that Rey shows that fate isn't inescapable, that she has free will and she can choose to be her own person. You know, in terms of the solar deity, you know, I guess again, if you're going to attain that level of progress in that regard, then you have your own free will, you know, and you're not chained to things anymore. So I think that, to me, that's what the story tells, is that we're not chained to our past. We're not chained to what we're born, the world that we're born into, that we have the freedom to choose and to become who we want to be and to become better people. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Yes. I was also looking for maybe just a little hint as to what's going to come out next, with Rhea absorbing the powers of it all to resurrect. And yeah, interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, you can, Michael.
A friend of mine out here, her and her husband own a company that they've done a lot of work with Disney, and their company's main focus is their consulting company, and they deal with two things. One, transmedia, which is taking a product like Star Wars and bringing it out and bringing it into movies and podcasts and books and video games and everything else, and to, you know, from a marketing perspective. But the other thing is that her husband has claimed that the hero's journey is dead, and that, not that it was a bad thing in the first place, but that the new journey for all of us is the collective journey. And that's actually what you're seeing them do with Star Wars now. And maybe that's partly to do with what the work he's done with them, but you see the collective journey. So we see one event, like the blowing up of the Death Star, or, you know, the rebellion in general, and then you see perspectives from multiple different viewpoints from throughout the universe. As today, we see Bad Batch is out today, right? It's a Bad Batch of clones, stormtroopers. And we've seen this with Marvel as well, where, you know, with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as well as the Scarlet Witch one, I can't think of the name of the title, but they're showing that as a collective journey. So they're not seeing it as an individual hero's journey. So I think it's kind of hard for us to take the modern Star Wars, anything other than maybe the first 6 movies, and apply the hero's journey to it, because I think they've moved on from that structure.
Thank you, Michael. Satiris.
Yeah. Hi, Michael, and thanks for the talk. It was great. I just want to ask you on how the way I see it. Prior to my Masonic life, I trained in Taoist Negung, and I saw a lot of simile there between Star Wars and the level of attainment the Jedi and the Sith respectively get with Negung and those skills. So the way I can connect it to Freemasonry is basically that you have the Trinity of Yin, Yang, and Tai Chi, which is the connecting line between the Yin and the Yang, the balance to the Force, so to speak, or the Great Jedi, or Luke, who eventually, Darth Vader, actually, Anakin, who brought the balance to the Force. So I was just, can we also kind of think of it as Yoda being wisdom, Darth Vader being strength and fortitude, as you said, and Luke being beauty, because you have three pillars, or the three lesser lights, alluding essentially to the three great lights, which are basically the light side, the dark side, and the balance.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I think that's why
I don't want to impose it on anyone. It's just, something that I've always been hardcore on Star Wars and Freemasonry and Negung. So, yeah, sorry, you're saying.
no, feel free to go on, but I like it. What I hope to do with this, I know the talk was a little short, but I really think it's like whatever we can see in this and whatever we can take out of this and see those characters, I'm perfectly fine with anybody challenging that and coming up with their own connections, because that's really what's important. But yeah, I could see Luke being the balance between the two of them, especially because he struggles so much, right?
Exactly. He's fluctuating essentially until the Return of the Jedi. And I'm only talking original trilogy because, I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to that. But you can see the struggle. And even in the Return of the Jedi, he's wearing black. But then at the end of the show, he's got his white flap underneath. So that shows that essentially the light side went over the dark side and so on and so forth.
Yeah. It's always been kind of weird, right? To like, how did he bring balance? By killing the Sith? Like if there's only two Sith and you killed all the Sith, then how is that bringing balance?
Not balance. I'd say it's turning his father, who was pretty dark, turned pretty dark, and then Darth Vader essentially was the catalyst for balance.
Yeah. I'm just thinking when you say that, I'm kind of thinking that the balance, like Rey brings balance back because Luke's kind of off by himself, pouting because of what happened with Kylo Ren. So she brings balance back because Luke's out of balance. So maybe the balance is in each individual character. And the Force is out of balance when any of those characters are out of balance. That's just a thought I have, thinking out loud.
Thank you for that, Satirius. Siva, you've got a question.
Yes, more than as a story of a galactic war, I tend to see Star Wars as the greatest love story ever told, in the sense that it's the story of Anakin, who was a Jedi, supposed to be the guardian and defender of all good, and trained as such from childhood, allows himself to be weak enough to be seduced to the evil side to save Padme, the love of his life. Earlier also, the evil in him, a bit of evil surfaces in him when his mother was in danger. But more important to the point that I'm making is his love for Padme. And do you see it as a theme of love and as a story that revolves around love? And that's one question. And the other question is, the evil, the personification of evil, Darth Vader, originally comes from the side of good. And it is evil is transformed, good transformed into evil. And Is it also seen that way? These are my questions. Thank you.
So in terms of the first question, I would say, definitely it's a love story on many levels. Not only that, but Han Solo and Leia, and then in the newer movies you see it again. That's definitely that case, and I think that probably alludes to the sacred marriage, right? I mean that's probably where that's coming from. That that love of the duality, that love that unites them into that oneness. So yeah, I would definitely agree that it's probably the greatest love story that was ever told. And what was the second question again?
That is Darth Vader, who personifies all the evil in the movie, who is a dominant evil force. He's actually, he was originally a good person, or he was originally from the side of good. And does it also signify something that what is evil, what we see as evil, was once upon a time good on many levels, on an esoteric level as well? There was, in the beginning, there was good, everything was good, and part of it became evil. And is there some kind of an allusion to characterization of Darth Vader as a person who was from childhood raised as a Jedi, but turned over to the other side?
Yeah, I think again that probably speaks to the duality, right? Like to what you said, that in the beginning there was good, and then there became evil. So I definitely think it's always that interposing of darkness and light over and over again. So I would agree with that.
Thank you, Siva, for your input. Very much appreciated. The other hand I can see up is Alan Turton.
Hello, Michael. Thank you for taking us on such a wonderful wander and another contemplation to reflect Freemasonry. I made a comment earlier, you must be one of the few people around that can actually see the spiritual story that's wrapped in Star Wars. My great interest, and the parallel that I would draw with Freemasonry, is that we're on a journey that if we can regularize ourselves, we can join with others in harmony and build a temple. And at the same time, we're building a temple within ourselves. And as a group, that attains a great force. With the Star Wars story, you've got a group of people trying to bring a balance to life to actually unify an empire and get that empire to work together in harmony. And of course, the whole of life is who we can relate to, who we can work with. And as a group, we can build anything we can dream of. But individually, we stop alone. To form that group, we have to regularize ourselves. And so within Star Wars and within Freemasonry, there are actually parallel stories there that bring the human race together. And if we can join together, we can form a great gestalt and do some wonderful things. So just a few comments, Brother Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much. I agree.
Okay, Brother Michael Jarzabek, on behalf of everyone here at the Lodge Hope of Karachi and all our guests this evening, thank you so much for taking us on a wonderful sojourn to a galaxy far, far away. I'm sure that the Bern will be diving onto their skyboxes and their Netflixes to download the latest Mandalorian. That's the modern day one, Satirius, you see, for all you ones who like
Mandalorian's good.
You see. So Michael, thank you for coming along this evening and getting us to think a little bit about the parallel journeys that we've went on as Freemasons and how it could be shown in a different universe. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Brian,
Well-
a couple of announcements going forward. This Thursday, the Grand Lodge of Scotland History and Heritage Group season is back, and with the view from over there. It's at 1 o'clock UK time start, because we're going to the far reaches of the planet. There's another Star Wars little ditty there, Brian, to bring our Brian into us. So it's 1 o'clock on Thursday. The New Masons Academy down in South Africa is Thursday evening as well, Brian. I'm sure they would welcome their support. Next week, we're bringing it back to Scotland. We're going back to the province that we heard about from Brother Alec Galbraith last week, and we have Brother Alan Beck, who's going to come along to talk about Mozart, Freemasonry, and the magic flute. So, Brian, I hope that you can find the time to come along next Tuesday at 7 p.m. and listen to Brother Alan Beck. And for those of you who don't know him, Alan is a very talented musician and singer and Burnsman. So I'm sure he will have a fantastic story to tell. Brian, at this time, there's a good few comments in the chat. There's some that I will copy and I'll put into our Facebook pages this evening. There's some that are rather witty as well. And the ruffians being the stormtroopers. So, and Paul, we're not getting Top Gun next week. So lots of good, interesting comments. So thank you all. Brian, please unmute and say your good evenings and thank yous to Brother Michael Jarzabek. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Michael.
History and Heritage, not tomorrow.
It's Wednesday, not Thursday.
Is it? Oh, it's Wednesday. Sorry, Brian.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Darth Slider.
Bye, Richard. Have a nice week.
Thanks, Umit.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you, brother. Thank you,
Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Appreciate that. Thanks,
Well
Gordon.
done, George.
Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you, Michael. Well done.
Thank you, Michael. Enjoyed it.
Thank you,
Michael, a
for the
wonderful
wonderful talk.
journey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Trust the Royal Marine to have the lightsaber.
Really enjoyed it.
In here, big Jabba Forbes.
Hey, Brian, I'll give you 5. Brother, I'm trying not to laugh at that.
So am I.
Funny I am.
That's great coming from Darth
The
Vader.
force be with us all.
I'll give you 4, Brian. And 3.
Good night, all. Good night.
I run.
And 2. And 1. Thank you, Brother Michael Jarzabek, for coming along to our lockdown lecture series here at the Hope of Karachi. It's very much appreciated. Good evening,
Thank you,
Brian.
Michael.